right,
ready?
so yeah, let's get rolling. Trae Crowder, welcome to the Road to Now.
Hello. Yeah, good to be here. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We actually, you and I have touched base like in December when you were in Nashville,
hmm
and the plan was we were both going to be doing the Minneapolis Comedy Festival, and then it got canceled
Right.
and or rescheduled, and that was a bummer. And then I just realized a couple of days ago I was like, man, probably also not a good time to be in Minneapolis either, huh?
Yeah. Wow. Honestly, that part of it hadn't even occurred to me until you just said that. But yeah, good point.
So
Yeah, it's crazy.
we allegedly we did shows together like 7 years ago in Tennessee. I don't think either one of us really remember it.
Yeah. No, but I mean that makes it. That checks out though that we would have. You know what I mean? Like I was around then, and I was in Knoxville, but I came to Nashville quite a bit. Did show not just like doing the zanies, those shows, those what were those beer shows I had on Wednesday nights?
Comedy of the Yazoos.
Yeah, that I did a ton of those, and I also I would do like bar shows around Nashville and stuff like that, and or it could have been in Knoxville or Chattanooga, but it very easily could have happened. But no,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
believe
remember
I believe
either.
people who said it this. People were like, yeah, you totally did. Remember this one time? And I was like, I'm going to trust you as a source. But
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
it's like there's like 23 comics on the lineup.
Right. Well, that's the thing with a lot of those shows in towns like that. It really shows anywhere depending on the show. But yeah, there could literally be 15 plus comics, doing shorter sets. So it's hard to keep up with everybody.
Yeah,
So Trey, being another entertainer who's used to being on the road and traveling and doing
Yeah.
live shows, for me, I suspect we're off the road probably for the next year and a half. What is it like being a stand-up, a one-man show? There's less crew probably that's
Yeah.
involved. You can space people out probably better in a lot of venues. How do you see it playing out for you?
Well, for me personally, I kind of think that it's a little bit different than a lot of comics, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I know that some clubs are now opening back up and having shows with like strict regulations, with like a cap on like 100-person cap, or around there, and they also nobody sits with anyone that they did not arrive with, like families or whatever sit together, but nobody else sits together. All the tables are spaced X feet apart. They check your temperature. You got to wear a mask in and out and all kinds of stuff like that. They have different mics for every comic, and they're taking all these precautions, which is good. But I haven't done I haven't talked to my agent or managers or anything about like doing any kind of research on this yet, because I don't know if we're even like to that point. But I very much suspect that my fans in particular, I don't know that I see them coming out to shows still while this is all going on, because like they're tend to be pretty progressive, pretty liberal people, so not the types to be like hand wavy or loose about the quarantine and whatnot. And also I have a lot of fans, like a lot of people do, that are at least 50 or older or whatever, so it could be at risk, plus just the like sort of optics of it or not being comfortable with it because of how they look at things. And I very much doubt that I would be able to kind of get back up and running the way that some other comics might be able to anytime soon. You say a year and a half, it could easily be a year and a half. Obviously, I hope that it's not. I don't know. There might be some kind of middle ground between where we are right now and just like the end, like there's a vaccine and it's over and the end, maybe. And at that stage, it might be more realistic. But as of right now, I'm not seeing it anytime soon for me.
this is just wanted to set this up, and this is kind of where I was going originally with the comments about coming out to see you in December, because it's interesting to me your fan base.
Yeah.
Because I had never been to one of your shows until I came out there. Like I knew who you were, right? I was like pumped you were doing well, and like I walked into Zanies, and I kind of expected to see like young, hip, kind of like looking, like progressive. It looked like it could have been a group of people from my hometown, Mount Pleasant, North Carolina.
Yeah. Right.
They're like country folks, man.
They are, yeah. We get a lot of, especially the shows in the South. Really, not just the South, because obviously every state has the country areas of it.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, we get a lot of that. People like rural people who drive in from surrounding small towns and stuff like that. Which I think is awesome, because I'm from a very small town, and those are my people as far as I'm concerned. So I think that's really cool. But yeah, you're right. Don't get me wrong. I'd like to have some of the cool kids too. Like to have everybody showing up. But yeah, it's probably not what you might expect initially.
Yeah, but I thought it was really incredible to see that. Actually, like I described it later on, is like when I walked in there and saw like all these folks who were just like from clearly like people driving up in trucks, like they were like the like real folks like from the country. I was like, when they walk in that place, it must be like this amazing feeling. I said something to somebody. It was like, it must have been like walking into a gay bar in the 1980s in the South.
Right.
Like, there's more than one of us?
Yes.
Oh my God.
They say that to us all the time, a version of exactly that. And you said a gay bar. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people use the phrase closet liberal to describe themselves, or like they've always been. And you nailed it. That's exactly sort of what the feeling is for a lot of them.
I saw an interesting video of yours earlier today, and you were in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how people see you in LA and they begin to make fun of Southern people with you, as if saying you're so much better than them, and you have to stop and say, well, wait a minute, I am Southern.
Right.
And I am a product of Southern culture, but I don't buy into this Southern heritage concept.
Yeah.
And you really explained that very well in the video. So have you had people who are, you call yourself the liberal redneck, have you had conservative rednecks who say, hey man, I don't agree with you, but I sure think you're funny?
Yeah, yes. I'm not going to sit here and act like it's that happens super frequently or all the time, but I've had plenty of exactly that interaction. Usually what it is for the most part is it's someone who is married to or dating or whatever a progressive from the South also. And so like presumably someone who does that, who would be married to a liberal or whatnot, even if they are conservative, you got to figure are a little loose about it all, or not as uptight about the whole thing because they live with the enemy or whatever. So that probably that's usually the experience when I get comments like that, is it's somebody who whose wife or husband is on my team. But not always. I've heard it just from regular country people too. I've heard it secondhand, like somebody will tell a buddy of mine or something, like almost like it's a secret, but they liked one of my videos or thought it was funny or whatnot, because I was making fun of the Confederate flag or whatever,
Yeah. So here's the thing, and here's why. There's so many reasons that I'm excited to have you on the show, because you're a person who grew up in the South, and you went through, like I as well, right? A lot of us who are listening grew up in the South, and we got a story, like the story we got told, right? And the story we got told didn't come from books; it came from relatives,
right?
It came from people around us, family, friends, and it's a story about the South was occupied, the South is being held down, that it was all about states' rights, and we've been occupied by the North. All of these stories. So what was your process for reasoning your way out of that and finding the information, which is abundant, but we don't always find? Like, how did you find that?
I'm trying to remember if there was like ever one, like just one flashbulb moment as far as all that goes. And I can't think of just one, but you're 100% right. In my Salina, Tennessee, extremely rural part of Tennessee, there was a lot of that War of Northern Aggression type stuff or whatnot. My dad wasn't really that tight, but he also like, I don't know. I can remember going to college, but I went to college at Tennessee Tech University in Cookeville, 40 miles up the road.
We've played there.
Yeah, right. And I remember going to college, and I had a history class in college, and I can remember the history professor saying he had to like give a disclaimer before he said resolutely that the Civil War was about slavery. Not a disclaimer like, oh, there's other interpretations, but a disc of like, listen, I know some of you are not going to like to hear this, but the fact of the matter is the Civil War was about slavery. And anyway, and I can remember him saying that because I can remember having this feeling of sort of sitting there like, oh shit, like looking around, you know what I mean? Like, ooh, how's that going to go over? You know, which is like ridiculous in retrospect, except for a lot of people, you know, it's not. And I know that I was already like exposed to that. I don't know. I guess it was more of a gradual thing for me because I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like I always just knew better because I mean, of course I didn't. You know what I mean? Like you're a kid, you believe what you're told, but definitely through college, and by the time I got out of college was very much like firmly in the camp of, you know, accuracy as far as the Civil War was concerned.
So you got an education. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, yes. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college and whatnot. And I don't, you know, I'm a comedian. I don't like really use my degree in that like direct fashion, but I still think that I'm a big proponent of education and think that it's, you know, the way, you know, a way out basically of that type of thinking or regressivism or whatever, for sure.
So what did you major in college?
So well, I have
VCR repair.
Yeah, I have an MBA, and when I tell people that, they're like, "Well, that's neither liberal nor redneck." But what it was I went to college because I was never not going to go to college because, like I said, my family, they very much, you know, you're going to college, and I wanted to, and I loved it too. But the whole time I knew I wanted to get into like comedy and show business and whatnot. So I thought, what degree can I get that is the most versatile or gives me the best chance to like get a good day job while I'm trying to be a comedian or whatnot, so I can afford to pay the bills. Because one thing I knew for sure is I didn't want to do that whole starving artist thing, you know, because I grew up poor and I was like, no, to hell with that. And I waited tables for 5 years in college, and that was plenty enough for me. So I just wanted to get the degree that I thought will give me the best chance of not having to struggle financially while pursuing my dream and all of that. And it seemed like, you know, business was the way to go as far as that goes. So, and that's kind of what happened. I got an office job working in contracts, and that's what I did the whole time I was getting started and everything. So, you know, kind of worked out.
I think the thing that we don't realize as entertainers is how important business is to what we do, and understanding business, especially as you move forward and things progress. So has it helped you at all?
Well, it's funny. I had a conversation with a comic buddy of mine on his podcast about this exact same thing recently, because he said what you just said, which is undeniably true, but which makes me feel even worse about saying I very often feel like I'm just as lost as everybody when it comes to that. You know what I mean? And I just feel worse about it than the rest of entertainers do, because I shouldn't be, you know, ostensibly because I have the degree or whatnot. But I mean, no, I mean, I definitely have a little bit more of a knowledge base than your average comedian does, for sure. Especially, you know, contracts are a big thing. And I still trust an actual lawyer whose job is that to, you know, I don't just try to do that shit myself or anything, but I do, you know, I can read, I know what they mean. I have a little bit of that sort of business literacy, I guess, that a lot of people maybe don't have.
Well, yeah, a couple of topics we wanted to talk about tonight that tap into all of this and kind of relate to the notion of like having these Southern origins. You know, as myself, Trae, like my third great grandfather was in the Confederate Army. You know, that's it, but that's a teaching thing that I use in the class. You know, I think one of the powers that we have, you know, in different directions, but like we both have the legitimacy of being one of the folks, right? And so much of dismissing narratives that counter this other narrative come out of like, well, that's what outsiders say. That's what Yankees say, or that's what those people say. And I don't know. As I always tell people, it's like my third great grandfather was conscripted in North Carolina, Confederate Army in North Carolina in January of 1865. And by March and April, they could not find him anymore because he abandoned like almost half the Confederate Army. So I always tell my students that my family was through with the Civil War before it was over. So we're pretty much through with it now. It's general philosophy.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I'm poor white trash and everything, and we're not so much into genealogy, I guess. But I don't like. I know that my family had been in that general area. I mean, for generations. So I have to assume that I had a direct ancestor that fought for the Confederacy, but I don't know for sure one way or the other like you do. And guess I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It's something to be said for not trying too hard to figure that out, right?
Yeah, right.
Is there anyone in your family, like anyone close to you who is completely against what it is you do?
I mean, no, not at this point. Not my close family. Like I have, to try to keep it somewhat brief, my mom and dad got divorced when I was a kid. I was raised mostly by my dad. My dad's side of the family is very small because most of the kind of like my grandparents' generations and up, the big chunk of them moved up north like years and years ago before I was born.
Smart people, very smart.
Yeah.
Really
as far as
high degree of intelligence.
And then they sent us their worst back down south too, Bob.
Yeah, right. But so I never really saw them or anything. It was just my dad, my paternal grandparents, my dad, and their only other child, my Uncle Tim, and my Uncle Tim is gay. So my Uncle Tim doesn't have any kids or anything, so I don't have any cousins. So it's like just us and then my sister. And my Uncle Tim being gay, he didn't get ostracized, he didn't get disowned or anything like that. And I think it just made all of them, a little more progressive than they may have otherwise been. Although they were also always like Southern Democrats, you know what I mean? And then like evolved along with the party, except my grandfather died in 2004. But like my Meemaw, she hates Donald Trump, can't stand him. She, loves her gay son. My little sister is very liberal. And then my mom's side of the family is much bigger. But because I was mostly raised by my dad, I mean, I saw some of my cousins and whatnot, but for the most part, we were never really close. I'm sure a lot of them probably cannot stand the shit that I'm saying, but I haven't really had much contact with them. I mean, since high school years or whatever anyway, so it's not really a factor. And my mom supports me and everything. But she was mostly apolitical. My mom she got wrapped up in the opioid thing. She was a drug addict and a felon and all that. So I don't think her and her friends were like sitting around the pipe talking about geopolitics or anything, like they like that. So, but I know she hates Trump too. And that's pretty much it as far as my family goes. My in-laws, a lot of them are conservative, but they're my in-laws. It ain't the same. It's fine.
You're going to find some way to make them your enemy no matter what. So
right, yeah. And,
your in-laws aren't going to like – there's something about you that your in-laws won't like anyway.
Right. And my wife is very much the black sheep of that family. That's sort of how me and her got together in the first place, So, like, when she brought me home and they realized what I was, commie or whatever, I'm sure from the very beginning they were like, yeah, this checks out. Of course.
Wait, you have an MBA. You're not a commie.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah, but, to them. But so, yeah, sometimes I weirdly almost feel bad about that because those same people I was talking about at the shows earlier come up to me talking about, like, being a closet liberal and how they didn't, I've always been the only one, I thought, and all this type of thing. Another thing they want to like talk to me about or ask me about is like how to best to navigate that with your family, like at Thanksgiving and stuff. And like I said, I almost feel weirdly guilty because like I've never really had to. Like a lot of my other friends that are liberals in the South and whatnot, they have to all the time. But I never really had that experience. So, I guess I'm lucky in that way.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, my philosophy is just remember that you loved them before this ever happened and treat them like that, If everybody treats each other like that, and then you'll get along.
Yeah, my wife says this is kind of a dramatic way to look at it, but I always think, like, at some point, like, I'm going to end up in the hospital or they're going to end up in the hospital, and we're going to visit each other. Well, not anymore with COVID. We'll probably never visit anybody in the hospital again. But
right.
but my thinking, and when I say this, because like there are people in our family who we know don't agree with us with politics, and I tell my son, I was like, we talk about politics. He's 9. I say we talk about politics all the time, but don't talk about politics with anybody else.
Yeah.
But I always say, well, I don't want that's not going to define our relationship. I don't want to talk about it with them. I don't care what they think. I don't care what they believe. Like we're not going to talk about that because we're going to need to love each other when it's most important. We don't need to have this thing between us already.
Right.
Trae, I wanted to ask you, you have a group of comedians who you work with.
Yeah. You broke up a little bit, but I have a what that I work with. What'd you say?
You have a group of comedians.
Yeah.
That you guys kind of work together and you're kind of all in the same headspace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll talk about working in that ensemble, because I watched some really great, hilarious videos, or at least one recent one where you guys are all on Zoom and portraying a group of COVID protesters.
Yeah. 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 So the two main guys that I tour with and they co-wrote the book with me in 2016 are Corey Ryan Forster and Drew Morgan. And like, we're not like a comedy troupe or anything, or like a writing trio. Each of us, if we're writing a sketch or something, of course we collaborate. But like, as far as stand-up goes, we've always each written our own materials. My videos and everything, I write all of those, but we got to be friends just as comics years ago and early on, because we had this major thing in common, which was that we were, both explicitly Southern, but also not the stereotypical version of a Southern comedian, like the blue collar guys and whatnot. You know what I mean? But we didn't drop the accent and just act like we weren't from the South either. And we all had that in common. So we bonded over that and got to be friends early on. And we'd always just talk about like how cool it would be if we could have a tour one day and all this stuff. And then so when I had my videos go viral and it just seemed like maybe that was on the table, I was very skeptical at the very beginning of a tour actually working, but we thought we'd give it a shot. And then, it went well, and that was 2016. And we've just continued to tour ever since. And then we've since had a couple TV projects that, we haven't been able to get fully off the ground or whatnot. But, yeah, we just kind of have that shared sensibility that sort of drew us together. But each of us still also does our own thing too. You know what I mean? So we're not like a full on, it's not like, like a band, but with comics, I wouldn't say. We just sort of like, frequent collaborators and tour together basically, and very good friends. I mean, I love them both.
Yeah, Bob, this is the thing, you as a musician. Yeah, maybe the payoff's better. Maybe you can create things that are good forever in a way that most comics can't. But you also have to always have, it's like, I always said being in a band is like being married to like 5 other people. It's like every with hard. With comedy, it's just, you just roll in there, man. It's kind of nice. Trae, I want to talk to you. I sent you this article that Bob actually sent me, the Tom Nichols article.
Yeah.
The title is, it's a provocative title. It's Donald Trump, the most unmanly president. And this was in the Atlantic, May 25th, just a couple of days ago. And Bob just sent it to me, like, and I picked it up. You'll get something from a friend. You'll look at it for a second. That maybe I'll read this. I picked this up and I just read it because it was like everything that I've kind of been thinking.
Right.
And it's not specifically about the South, but that's the way that I always think about it, because it's what I know. Mm-hmm. And the whole concept is that if you think about like what made, in highly gendered terms, right? We're not, there's problems with this, but like we still know what it is. What it meant to be a man in the South, that the person that you wanted to be was like someone who was quiet, thoughtful, someone who understood, someone who took care of their own business, didn't sit around waiting for people, somebody who didn't complain, somebody who did not blame others when things went wrong, just saw themselves as the one. And in that, there's problems, but like, I feel like in that sense of, I've got to take care of things, I've got to take care of my family, I'm not blaming anybody. There was this core of something really good that I think we could have pulled out of that, right? And I think we still can. But when you take what that is and you compare it to the person that is the icon now with so many of these folks, Donald Trump, it is insane. Donald Trump is always whining.
Yeah. Yes. when you sent me that article, I also devoured it for the same reason you did, because this specific thing was the first and biggest, like, what the hell aspect of the whole Donald Trump situation for me when he first started like gaining steam in the election in 2016, when it was like seeming like it might be a real thing. I couldn't get over it. It was just the whole time I was like, really? And this right here is exactly why. And actually, I did Bill Maher's show right after the election that year, and I talked about this on there. And at first, what I said was, I was like, I know for a fact that if you went back in time to before Donald Trump got involved in politics, and you asked your typical, like, redneck man, or just, working class white American male, if you'd ask them, what is your opinion on Donald Trump? I guarantee you that universally, or nearly universally across the board, it would have been some version of, I think he's a, blue blood Yankee, born with a silver spoon up his ass, who thinks he's smarter than everybody else, thinks he's better than everybody else, and needs his ass whipped. It would all 80 and 90% of the answers would have ended with needs his ass whipped, because of like just the type of person he is so antithetical to everything I'd ever seen those guys like admire or idolize or whatever. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, and the policies and all that, and the whole narrative that came out about him, like, being the only one speaking to them and making all these promises he couldn't keep. I understand all that. I'm talking about before you even get to any of that, just him as a man. I could not believe that they were actually, coming on board with him for exactly all these reasons, the reasons you said, the reasons that are in that article. And I mean, I still think that it's insane, but yeah, I mean, I still haven't really even gotten over it, because I like, it still kind of doesn't make sense to me, that part of it. Cause like, it's not like he came out of nowhere as a political force, but like, he had literally been famous for being a rich tool for like 30 years. You know what I mean? So like The Apprentice was huge. They knew who he was, and I did not like him, I guess, before he started going after Obama. Maybe that's when it started, but like, no, it's insane. It's insane.
And that's the thing, is like, I remember when I was building houses in North Carolina, and like from like 1999 to like 2004, right? I remember a common bumper sticker that you'd see on people's trucks or their vans or whatever they had was, "We don't give a damn how you do it up north." Like, right. I mean, it's so insane to me, not just because people were willing to abandon that, but because in the heads of young, poor white kids running around in the South, the quintessential bad guy was the slickster New York guy who rolls up in a limousine and doesn't care. It's not just that it's like, I can't believe, wow, that guy. It's like, no, that was the guy that we thought was the enemy.
Yeah, no, I know, absolutely, I know, and I'm like, I think that, I mean, I don't know for sure what the answer is, but I think that it comes down to obviously a lot of the, the racism and that, all that type of the xenophobia and all that stuff. But also that they were just so desperate. By the time he came along in 2016, most rural Americans were so desperate for someone to, promise to fix things for them, that they were just willing to go with even that guy as their champion. Do you know what I mean? Like, and of course, he was lying. And what I truly don't understand is how 4 years later, when he hasn't followed through on any of those promises, they could still, be going for it, other than just no one likes to admit that they were wrong, and you get firmly entrenched and just, but yeah, it's, but no, it blew my mind to begin with. And it still blows my mind really when I think about it. Like, I think about my grandpa, my dad's dad, and just the idea of him being, a huge Trump guy, like trying to emulate Donald Trump, is just so asinine to me. You know what I mean? Because everything about him is the opposite of how my grandfather tried to conduct himself. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy.
Is it possible that Donald Trump represents a big middle finger to
Yes.
the system? And that's
Yes.
what he is. Like, those big foam fingers
Yeah.
at the football games, but just like it's a big middle finger that people who feel like they've been forgotten and kicked aside and demeaned, and everyone else has gotten the leg up, or everyone else got the hand out, but they never got it.
I know. I definitely think that's a huge part of it. Actually, one of the things I said when I was on that show talking about this was, I was like, sure, I'm not saying all the racism and xenophobia and all that. Like, look, it didn't hurt. Don't get me wrong. But in my opinion, all of that stuff was just the icing on the fuck you cake that he baked for all of them, to everybody else.
I've said this on the podcast before, and I think, Trae, you'll get what I'm saying. Like, last time I said it, I was like, edit that out because it might sound bad, but it's honest. He is the white trash. He talks like a white trash person. You know what when I say this, I mean, I separate them from other people. I'm talking about the kind of person that will go to work. Their manager will ask them to do something they don't want to do. And then flash forward, they're walking back home in their house. And they're like, I thought you were supposed to be at work. And they were like, well, my manager's a son of a bitch. And I told him. I finally told him. And that's as good. That's as good as a paycheck for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yes. That well, they would say it, that whole, like, he tells it like it is thing, which is just another, basically just he's an asshole out loud pretty much. And that, and that's a thing that some people respect for whatever reason, but no, I definitely think that that's part of it too. I mean, there's a lot of parts of it, and they're all unfortunate.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, I've heard people say before, well, he just says what we're all thinking.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Like, God, I really hope not. Or, like, I know we're not all thinking it, but if even now just knowing that there's that many people also thinking that is very disheartening.
It's like, so that was just what you were thinking.
Right. Yeah. And not just for the content of the things he says, but just the way he says them and how dumbly, it's like thinking that's what most people's inner monologue sounds like. It's like, that's upsetting.
I think as bad as some of the policies have been, the thing about Trump is, and it doesn't matter if he changed tomorrow, if he completely changed tomorrow, and he said, these riots are terrible. We need to come together. We need to find a common thread that everybody in this country can rally around. And we got this virus. We got these terrible killings of black men and women throughout our country. We need to find a way to come together. I want to be your president. I want to be everybody's president. I want to lead us all, to better days. We wouldn't believe him.
No, I mean, I would.
Like half the country, more than half the country, just wouldn't even buy into it. They wouldn't even, because there's been so many lies and just his attitude is just awful, and the tweets and the social media and all that. So,
no, I would be under the assumption that it was some kind of like double or something, or they had like a Trump bot or something that they put in his place or whatnot. Because I just straight up don't believe that he's capable of any change, let alone like that kind of 180, shift in everything that he represents. So no, I absolutely wouldn't buy that for a second.
If I was driving down the road and heard him say that on the radio, I would pull over and go to Twitter and see what just happened, because it was like something bad happened.
Whose impersonation of Trump was that? Because it was really good, except for all the stuff he said.
So the past couple of weeks, Ben and I have been kind of debating Donald Trump follower cult versus cult of personality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it a cult or is it a cult of personality? Right? Is that right, Bob? I mean, that's
because a cult of personality is I looked at this up this week. It's holding up, and you said it, Ben. I think you said it. He's held up as the ideal, right? That's the cult of personality. Like, this is the ideal, right? But the cult is you're drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, Trump one day says, "Hey, remember I talked about the Clorox thing? Well, guess what? We're going to do a study. So we need 3,000 volunteers," and 3,000 people show up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to give a cop-out answer. I think that it depends on which Trump support. You know what I mean? It's like because some of them are absolutely that might as well be in a cult. I think like there definitely are a chunk of them who would straight up come and drink the bleach if he asked them to. But I think that it's also undeniably it is a cult of personality thing that he has going on with him representing, what they think a person should be like.
Lisa says Trump is the mouthpiece of the shitty people in our country.
Mm-hmm.
He is evil in his own right, but it's his supporters that are the bigger problem. Lisa was at a protest today.
Yeah.
She wrote in she was at the protest in Chicago, which I saw pictures of that. That was really crazy. Lisa, I'm glad you're okay.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree completely with that. He's like a symptom. I mean, but it's bigger than that because of the office that he occupies. But I mean, yes, the underlying cause, that led to Donald Trump. I mean, yeah, all those people are still there and they're not going away. But I really do think though that it whether progress happens one funeral at a time. They're not all old or anything, but like I do think that their numbers are still ultimately diminishing,
right.
the further down the road we go. I mean, I have to believe that or I couldn't sleep at night, but yeah.
But that's the thing. But this is the thing I've been talking about on the podcast is that their narrative of the way this country was and is supposed to be, like the foundations for that are gone. I mean, like we as a country think that we today, a lot of people think that the 25 years after World War II, 25, 30 years after World War II, the way it was then for white people, by and large, was the way this country has always been. And people cannot wrap their minds around the fact that that was a moment that was driven by exogenous factors. It wasn't just the way it was supposed to be. You have progressive legislation combined with the post-World War II boom and one of the largest social leveling processes any place, any time that most anybody who's ever lived has ever seen. And they can't understand why it's not that good anymore. And this goes back to Trump. Like, and it's not just about Trump, because I want to focus more on people. But I think instead of encouraging each other to talk about what is going on, it's way easier to say, well, it's somebody's fault. It's easier, right? It's somebody else's fault. If you're the best basketball player in the world and you're losing games, well, it must be somebody else's fault. Somebody's tampering with the ball. But if it never occurs to you that maybe I'm just not the best basketball player in the world, or maybe I need to work to get better, then you're never going to actually improve.
Or maybe the team needs to get the pieces around you, the other supporting players around you to make you the best.
Yeah.
You saw the Jordan documentary. Sorry.
And they also, yes, it is always easier to blame someone else, but also they never have the right scapegoats in the first place. You know what I mean? Like you're blaming, the Mexicans or the Chinese or whatever for, you not having a job anymore, when in reality it's, the capitalists, the 1%, the rich people, the people that pull the strings of these ideologues that they still vote for and everything, because they don't have their scope, on the right target, and never have, because they're misdirected all the time. And but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I get, like, the thing is, I'm sympathetic to the plight and the desperation and all that, because I'm in my hometown, Salina, Tennessee, was propped up entirely by this one big factory, a clothing factory that left in the 90s. And that was right around the time, OxyContin showed up and everything, and like all that mixed together. And then 20 plus years later, and I mean, like, it's bad. It got bad quick and it stayed bad for a generation now. And like, I understand people being tired, scared, angry, upset, desperate, all that. Like I said, I just wish that it manifested itself differently, or they had, or they listened to, the right people. I wish that Donald Trump hadn't become the answer to all of these woes for so many of them. But here we are.
Trae, talk for a minute about, and this is going to change for a second, Ben, if it's okay with you. I'm going to change the subject a little bit. You had a viral moment right? We talk about this, where we hear about this all the time, a viral moment. You actually experienced that
Yeah.
with, one of your videos just, going viral, and overnight some would say, I mean, you worked for
Yeah.
many years on your craft, but people would say, oh, overnight success. You got a lot of attention really, really fast. Talk a little bit about that experience, what that felt like, and the good and the bad that's come from it.
I mean, obviously it was absolutely insane, hands down the craziest like time of my life. You know what I mean? Obviously, because I have two sons, becoming a dad is a huge life changing moment and a better moment. But it's also something that is not as weird, I don't think, as having a viral moment. You know what I'm saying? And it was crazy. I mean, yes, I had been doing stand up for at that point like 6 years. And I had just, to me, in my mind, those videos were just like, this is another kind of shot I'm taking. You know what I mean? Like a little like project of mine. Like I had the idea of talking to my buddies about it. I was like, I'm thinking about doing this. They're like, yeah, it's a good idea. You should do that. But I mean, I didn't know. So the one that went crazy viral was actually, it was the second one. And the first one I did, it got like something like 70,000 views or something like that. And I was over the moon about that. I was encouraged, to say the least. I was like, yeah, so okay, maybe I'm onto something. But then that second one, like all told, it ended up getting like over 30 million views or something like that. And I remember I still had my day job. I worked in an office. I was there, and I had like posted it. I guess I posted it the night before, and obviously, or maybe not. Did I post? I actually might have posted it on my lunch break. I can't remember the details of that. But I think I had it ready and either posted it at night or the next morning or something. But anyway, I'm sitting there at my day job and in meetings and stuff. And my phone was literally like hot in my pocket. Like it was burning me. I had to pull it out because of the number of notifications I was getting. And I had to turn it off because it was like, I thought it was going to explode or something. It was heating up so much. It was like freezing up and everything. I just turned my phone off. And then after that and everything that followed, like the weeks that I mentioned earlier, being skeptical about the tour, the first date of the tour was at the Punchline in Atlanta, probably like 3 weeks or so after that video went viral. And I was very much sweating it because even up until that point, I was like, man, there's a huge difference between clicking share on a video, no matter how many people did it, still, that's one thing, versus purchasing a ticket, leaving your house, getting a babysitter, whatever, you know what I mean? I was like, the people are not going to come see me, and then it was sold. That first show was sold out. The first bunch of shows were all completely sold out. And it was, and then I got a call from a lit agent, ended up, selling a book and writing a book. I signed a development deal with Warner Brothers to, make a TV show. And then since then I've done like 5 iterations, none of which have actually gotten made, but that whatever at the time that was on HBO did, Bill Maher had a show on Sirius and whatnot. And all of this was within a like span of months, and it was absolutely insane. It's also a blur, obviously. Like, look, that was 2016. So, and yeah, also it was 2016. So, just think about because that happened in like April and May.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Right. Yeah. No, for me, it really, sometimes I almost forget that they were the same year because it was like, for me personally, 2016 was a great year, except for, I mean, I was devastated by the election just like everybody else. And, but yeah, it was just a very insane time, and it's very much a blur in my head looking back at it. And I had been doing it for 6 years. I wasn't just a regular dude who made a video and then went viral. It was a thing I was trying to do, although of course I didn't anticipate it happening. But still, in terms of, so I don't know, overnight success, I would like to not call myself that, but in terms of my life and everything about it, it 100% changed literally overnight. Like one day it was this, and the next day it was different forever. And it was, that's a thing that, a lot of people don't experience, and it's pretty insane even now thinking back on it, like trying to wrap my head around it, you know. And then I've like, it was just like out of nowhere kind of meteoric rise at first, and then it very much like leveled off, and that's kind of where I've been at for the last 4 years. But I'm kind of okay with that though, because like, you know, I haven't gone anywhere. Like I'm hanging around, and I'm like, I think I'm learning about how this works and getting better and whatnot. So like, hopefully I can just like sustain it over the long term, you know what I mean? As opposed to just like popping real hard and then disappearing forever, which was definitely something I was worried about at first.
Now that you're on our podcast, I think you can feel confident.
Yeah, right. I'm here.
You're going down, man. Sorry. So have you gotten any advice from any comedians who have been there for a while, who are still very successful or still, you know, I'm really curious, what does Jeff Foxworthy think of you?
I don't think he's crazy about me, and I do think he's at least somewhat aware of me. I never had direct contact with him. I know at one point I was supposed to do. He has like a serious show, but not every night or something like, I can't remember. But anyway, and I was gonna like do an interview on it, and then it got canceled. And I don't know why. Maybe it was just no reason.
He was like, who's booked? Who's
right? Yeah, right. That's definitely how it seemed to me. But I don't, you know. But I could be making that up in my head. I've never had direct contact with him, and I got nothing but respect for Jeff Foxworthy. By the way, I mean, I feel like you have to respect that guy. I mean, he was just an unreal. Cultural phenomenon, and a very, very fantastic comic too. But yeah, I have no reason to believe that Jeff Foxworthy hates me, but I certainly also don't have any reason to think that he's a big fan or nothing. I think he's at best lukewarm on me, if he knows who I am.
Bob, you know something?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't know comedy. Ben, you're the most I know about the comedy world. Like that's all my comedy experience comes through you.
Just keep not watching anybody else. That'd be great.
Have you gotten really good advice about, okay, you're here at this point, here's what you got to do to stay there, or, you know, things like that?
Honestly, it's very simple and everything, but mostly what everybody says is just to like keep going, meaning like there's a lot of, especially in like TV and trying to get into TV and getting a show on TV and whatnot, it's very much a numbers game, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. There's a lot of repeated failure. It's like just stay at it, and then that, and also like keep doing the thing that you were good at in the first place. You know what I mean? Meaning like not getting like sidetracked with trying to be something else, and just focusing on staying funny. You know, you can't like rest on your laurels. So I mean, it's kind of like your garden variety show business advice, I guess. But I think the reason everybody says those same things is because they're, you know, true. Mm. And I don't have, because like I said, you know, hillbilly mama, single, white trash dad, and everything. I'm like, I've never had a problem with like, you know, forgetting where I came from, or letting this all get to my head, or taking any of it for granted, or any of that type of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've done a pretty good job of staying grounded between all my background and also my aforementioned wife, who keeps me very grounded.
Well, I know you're grounded because Ben sent an email to us this week, and you're like, well, I got some honeydew work to do here around the house. I'll get to this in a little bit. So, and then I listened to
the last episode of your podcast, Well Read podcast, and you were like digging out to put an inflatable pool in or something.
Yeah, it's not an inflatable pool, but it's like it's a stand-up, like, you know, liner, above ground Target pool or whatnot. It's not like a real pool. It's somewhere. Here's how I describe it on the podcast. I think it's pretty accurate. It's like, it's an above ground pool. It's not the level of above ground pool that like a redneck would build a deck around.
That's what I was going to ask.
Right? Yeah. No. We've all seen those pools. My buddy had one when I was a kid, and we loved it. It's not that level, but it also isn't. It's somewhere between that and like, it's not an inflatable deal either. You know, it's somewhere in the middle. But we've got it up now. I'm sitting here looking at it. It's been a big hit. We just realized like summer's here. My sons are 7 and 8, and
that's perfect age.
You're in the valley, right?
Right. Yeah. And they're like, summers here, they've obviously been cooped up. They haven't been anywhere. My wife and I have only gone to like the grocery store, wherever, and we never take them with us. So like, and they'll ride their bikes around like in front of the house and whatnot and that type of thing. But for the most part, they haven't been anywhere in 3 months or whatever. And now school, you know, the online version of school they had is over. They're 7, 8 years old. And so she had this idea and I, you know, couldn't really argue with it. But now that it's up, I mean, yeah, they love this thing. So I feel like it was a pretty good choice.
It's going to be a good week for it too.
Like, to your neighbors, did you kind of feel like you had to like go out of your way to be like, hey, you know, I know it's an above ground pool, not going to build it. Like, you feel like you need to justify yourself, like being a Southerner in the middle of the valley? Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I
definitely think that when they do notice it, they're going to think, yeah, that's about right. You know, this works out. But all of these like little backyards back here are all fenced in with pretty high. You can't really see into each other's. You'd have to like make it a point and go out of your way to look into your neighbor's yard and see what they got going on back there. But I mean, 7, 8-year-old boys, they're loud all the time, but they're always like, if they're out here with squirt guns, they're loud. Do you know what I mean? So like, it is what it is.
Ben, you want to open it up to,
well, I got one more thing I wanted to share with you guys. It's relevant. I felt like we could not talk about the recent protests that have been going on. I kind of mentioned it earlier. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that in Nashville last night, we lost a statue. And we lost a statue right down on the Capitol lawn.
Was it the Walker statue?
No. William Walker doesn't have a statue; he has a plaque. You know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't memorialize him then or like about it. They were just like, we should put this up to this guy who spread slavery to Nicaragua in the 1850s. But this was of a guy named Edward Cormack. And it's funny because I didn't know much about him, right? And I saw a friend of mine who's a historian was like, wow, can't believe anybody knew who he was. And then somebody was like, yeah, pretty good that they knew which one was the racist statue to knock down there. And I was like, well, I don't think they needed to really read up on them. I felt like,
yeah, take your pick.
It's like Polk, Jackson. It's like,
yeah, right, yeah.
But I was just reading up on this guy. He is an interesting. I mean, this guy got a statue, largely responsible for running Ida B. Wells, the journalist who was covering lynching in Memphis, running her out of Memphis by basically targeting her. This guy was, I mean, so these guys who don't know Ida B. Wells, she was a trailblazer in terms of speaking up against lynching, about getting the word out there. She worked for a newspaper in Memphis called the Memphis Free Press. Memphis Free Speech. And she actually, she published a lot about the lynchings that were going on there. That newspaper was destroyed so heavy that there are not existing copies of it. Like, there's no evidence except for what was reprinted in other newspapers. So this guy was like behind that, but he also was the newspaper editor in Memphis and also here. And he worked for the Nashville Tennessean, which basically the original, like earlier version of what is today our Tennessean. He eventually got into a spat with the guy who ran the paper, and that guy and his son shot him in the middle of the street in Nashville. But a really pretty terrible person. You know, as he got the statue in 1925, largely to recognize his efforts for prohibition. But I felt like I should go in and because he pushed the prohibition ticket to get votes. Long story. But I was like, I'm going to go back and read some newspapers about him and try to figure out about the statue when it was actually dedicated. And I was reading it and I was like, oh my God, I got to read this. And it's not just about him. This is about the woman who made that statue. You guys ready for this? I'm going to read you. This is March 20th, 1925 from our Nashville paper, the Nashville Tennessean. All right. Her name was Nancy Cox McCormick, designer and sculptor of the Carmack Memorial. She gave some of her interesting accounts of her experiences in Italy, where she did the actual work on the statue of Senator Cormack. If you guys are thinking about the time and place I just talked about, wait for it. Talks about her showing off her experience. One of Miss McCormick's works executed during her stay in Italy was a bronze bust of Benito Mussolini, dictator
yes,
of Italy.
I knew it was coming.
A photograph of the bust which Miss McCormick showed the Tennessean reporter clearly shows the Napoleonic figures of Mussolini and the determination and strength of the man to whom she believes Italy will one day build monuments as she has to all her great figures. Goes on to say, she says, the Mussolini bust was made by, so she says, Italy needed Mussolini, said Miss McCormick, and still needs him, as the unifying principle of the state, which had become so torn by the factional dissensions, impoverished by the greed and graft of corrupt officials, strangled by communists, and otherwise made a plaything by opposing groups that nothing less than a supreme dictator could have saved the situation. So guys, a lot of times we can be glad to get rid of a statue because of the person represented in the statue. I feel like maybe both the person in the statue and the person who created it. I don't know. Do we pick it back up? Maybe not.
Well, this goes back to us saying, wow, how do people still support Donald Trump? Or who is still supporting Donald Trump? This is the same thread, right, Ben? This is the idea is a cult of personality. It's like, here is the ideal. Here is the ideal who can save us from the communists and save us from the anti-fascists. Here's the fascist that can save us from the anti-fascists.
Yeah.
Well, Mussolini didn't meet the best end, so I'm not sure if he's a model I'd want to follow. So I just wanted to bring that up. And much love to everyone out there in the streets, honestly. It strikes me that statue came down, and the news last night was mostly talking about the businesses. And, everyone, so many people right now are suffering in so many different ways. But none of the coverage that I see did anybody say, I wonder what it's like for Black Nashvilleians to have to walk past the statue of someone who was instrumental in terrorizing one of the great figures in American, but particularly Black history, Ida B. Wells. And, sometimes we don't think about that, but maybe if you thought about that a little bit harder, you might understand that it's not always as easy for you if you're not white.
Right.
And Tanya Marsh writes, so Ben, now that the Stonewall Jackson statue in Richmond is covered with Black Lives Matter graffiti, shouldn't we keep both the statue and the graffiti, to preserve the history?
First of all, I want to respond generally to that question the way that I usually do, which is some people say if we get rid of statues, we'll get rid of history. But I assure you, as someone who has a PhD in history and who teaches history at a university, that I do not go around to memorials to find the lessons that I teach in my class. And I promise everyone out there that even if we get rid of all the statues, I'm still going to be talking about the Confederacy and what happened there. So that's just my promise to you. I'm just one person. We're not going to erase it. We'll continue to talk about it. But I don't know. I mean, the addition of the graffiti, I mean, that it marks it. I mean, but with all these things, there's no right answer to this.
That's true.
Right? I mean, there's no right answer unless you're looking at a symbol that was put up out of hatred, and that people that you're supposed to love has to walk by every day, and your own selfishness of being like, but I like that statue, has always been there. You think that's a more important issue than actually how people feel, that you're supposed to be brothers and sisters with. But I think the discussion about it being covered with graffiti, that's worth having, because now these markers and these symbols, they're not just representations of the people of that time and those people. They're representations of who we are at the time they're put up, and who we are at the time that we preserve them, and who we are at the times that we mark them like that. So I don't know. That's worth talking about, but I also think that does change things, and it may end up symbolizing a moment in American history more profoundly that way than before.
And it's not just the South. The Frank Rizzo statue in Philadelphia was also graffitied last night as well. Amy writes, so then what do we do with the graffiti that has appeared on several monuments on the National Mall?
I mean, again, that's the problem is, do you then preserve the statue? Like, is the statue of like Jackson, is the statue, does it become a statue that represents that moment? Because if so, you can't change it anymore, right? If that's what you wanted to represent. I don't know.
I would say probably if these statues can be repaired or, restored, that's probably what's going to happen.
Well, they did throw pink paint on that Nathan Bedford Forrest statue out there on the interstate here in Nashville, and I will say it did change it. Now it's kind of funny. So.
Wait, is that the one? Is that the statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest where he looks like a cartoon ghost version of Nathan Bedford
That's
Forrest?
it, man.
That's
That's it.
That was when he was on Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. The Scooby-Doo version.
Yes, that was a hilarious episode, by the way.
Yeah, well, because I have to say, like, nothing about that man is funny, but that statue was already at least a little bit funny because of how absurd it was. So it being pink now is only adding to the the overall aesthetic of that particular statue, in my opinion. I feel like what you're saying about if you tear the statues down, it's like acting like it never happened. There's a difference between, acknowledging your history and celebrating it. Like all those statues are celebrating the Civil War in the South role in it, that's the problem. Of course, you don't ever want to pretend that it didn't happen or anything like that, the opposite, but you shouldn't be celebrating it though. So like, I don't know, I feel like take that Stonewall Jackson statue down, but maybe keep it with the graffiti on it in some, museum around there or whatnot, or, like keep it and leave the graffiti on it. Cause I do think that there is something kind of cool about that, or certainly impactful about it. But I just don't think, to me, it doesn't change the fact that they shouldn't be standing at the end of the day,
Yeah. And with the, you have to remember when they're put up and like when these things are named. There is one of the ones that could not be accessed last night. There's a Nathan Bedford Forrest bust in our state capitol building that was put there in the 1970s. Yeah,
and it's roped off and stuff, right? Or the last time I was there, I remember looking at it. They had like not like a cage around it, but they definitely had it like roped off. Like you weren't supposed to, get close to it. Pretty gross.
And just a reminder for everyone who's still wondering, yes, the ROTC building on Middle Tennessee State University's campus is still named Forrest Hall, and I'm still mad about it. And our small government Republicans in our state legislature still refuse to let the people of the community change the name like they wanted to anyway. What else?
Any other questions from our attendees?
Bob, I've got one question for you if there's no more.
Okay.
You asked Trae what was some of the best advice he got as he developed, his career. I'm going to turn that on you. Like, what do you think was the best advice you got?
You mean like me personally or the band?
Well, both.
Well, I think Tom T. Hall said, enjoy the ride. That was really good for us, especially because of how he was in Scott and Seth's life, his music. And other than that, like I can't really think of anything specific. Scott and Seth are pretty sure of themselves, pretty confident. So a lot of advice probably just, went astray, but smart nonetheless. But, and then me, I don't know. I think it's kind of like around the same theme of just kind of enjoy every moment of it because it passes quick. And look, here we are. Like it's funny at the end of every year, I would always say, man, I wonder if we're going to ever walk on the stage again. Because, we end up in December and then we have this break. We play New Year's, then we're off for like a month or whatever. I would always wonder, like, the end of the year before New Year's, man, this could be the last time. If something happens to somebody, or you never know how life goes. And look, here we are. Like, who knows when we're going to play again? Like, who knows? So
yeah,
you got to enjoy, every moment you can. Martin writes, can you name a president or other world, I think he meant leader, that would have been less equipped to deal with this moment in history?
So I know that's for Ben, but I want to say real quick, because that just made me think of something that I went through mentally last night, which I thought was like kind of funny, but also really weird, just so in keeping with how weird the world is right now. I was rewatching Independence Day with my sons, right? Because I've started showing them some like some more, a little, still like that's about as like adult as I'll go with them at this point. But like that, War of the Worlds, Tremors, Gremlins, that sort of thing. And it's been big hits. So we're watching watching Independence Day last night, and they were really into it. But then it got to that big climactic, famous rallying call speech that Bill Pullman gives as the president that everybody remembers from that movie. And it's so cheesy, but it's so cheesy in such a good way, where it ends, like today July 4th will no longer be an American holiday. It's the day that we'll all we stood together and said we will not go quietly into the night, and all that, today is our Independence Day, that whole thing. And then he gets in a fighter jet and leads the charge against the alien threat, right? And like I'm sitting there watching it, and I just couldn't help it. The first thing he's doing the speech, and the first thing that popped into my head was like, God, dude, imagine Donald Trump having to give a speech like this. And at first I laughed about it because I was like, how absurd it would be. But then I started getting really upset by the whole thing. So it's the first time that part of Independence Day has upset me on such like a fundamental level, because I'm sitting there watching it thinking like, man, this is what the office of the presidency used to sort of be in the eyes of, Hollywood and the world and whatnot. You know what I mean? Like this sort, like it was accepted that is what a president is like. You know what I mean? Leads by example. He's a strong man, an orator who can inspire people and lead by doing and all this stuff. And I know those are grandiose terms to discuss a Roland Emmerich. Right. Yeah.
Right. And someone who can console in moments of national tragedy, which we've been experiencing.
And I know that's like a kind of ridiculous way to talk about a Roland Emmerich blockbuster from 1996, but like it's all true though. And just thinking about that versus Trump and what the U.S. president is right now. And everybody knows it. Everybody sees it. And just like basically the contrast between Bill Pullman as president and Donald Trump as president was alarming to me. But
I got to say the Bill Pullman years were the best.
Yeah.
If only we could have another president like him again.
I think that I imagine Trump going up there and trying to figure out how to blame coastal elites for the aliens.
Yeah, right.
Right? Let's keep them fighting with each other. It's not my fault. I just want you guys to know, not my fault.
Seriously, the buck stops. Doesn't stop with me. I mean, like
in China invited the aliens.
It is absolutely, and I don't think this is we think about the conservative liberal paradigm. This is off of that, right? This Donald Trump is not. If I am against Donald Trump, or I believe he should not be president, I don't believe I'm saying anything bad about Republican policies. I really don't. Or anything about how taxes should be, or how environmental policy should be managed and worked out. I don't believe I'm making any statement on that. I'm just saying this individual should not be the president. And the fact that he is, and so many senators and congressmen and women seem to follow him blindly, like he's a cult leader, that is to be against. It is okay to be against that, and to not feel like I shouldn't feel like I'm being divisive, being against that, because it just seems like common sense.
Yeah. To a worst president, I can only think of a joke answer, which would be William Henry Harrison, mostly because he mostly just spent his time sick and then died 32 days into office. He probably would have died. Although, I don't know.
Warren G. Harding.
Well, Harding, okay. I'm not going to – me and my wife both have this kind of soft spot for him.
He's a punchline.
He is a punchline. But, he gave like an anti-lynching speech in Alabama when he was president. After that, probably wrote some gross letters to some ladies.
Mount Jerry. Amy, well, Lisa, I see your comment about what's going on in Chicago right now, and it's horrible. It's going on here in Raleigh, and when we're done this, I'll be back on the television watching it. Just hope that you keep yourself safe and stay inside. Amy Story writes, related question, are there presidents who have risen to the occasion after starting out ineptly? Here's a question. Before the invasion of Iraq, did George W. Bush rise to the occasion?
I mean, I think so.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think so too. You mean like right after 9/11, right? And like
After
like you said,
9/11,
up until he let us in that quagmire, right?
Until that.
Yeah, dude. That honestly, that when the first pitch at Yankee Stadium or whatever moment that he had, like that's a truly presidential moment, and it mattered, and it's the type of thing that you could never see Donald Trump doing in a million years. And I hated George Bush. I couldn't stand him, but I'm saying, like, again, the gulf between him and Trump is just colossal.
Trump couldn't do it because I don't think he could throw a baseball that far.
No, of course he couldn't.
He'd have somebody else do it for him.
Well, he refuses to throw out first pitches because he doesn't look good doing athletic things, so he just refuses to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Wells writes, so there seems to be a big mistrust of expertise professionals from many right-wing Americans, especially in the South. Where does the anti-education sentiment come from, and how do we curtail it?
But, well, I mean, I think it comes down to this feeling of Chris Rock talked about it in one of his early specials that I loved, where he was talking about his community, but I think it applies here too, and I think that's true in a lot of instances. But this sort of idea of like, you know all this stuff, all this math, all these facts and whatnot. Well, let me ask you this: can you whip my ass? like that's all that people don't like to feel as though someone is like condescending to them or thinks they're smarter than them, even if they are smarter than them, or even if it's not about, of course they know more about this than you because they studied this for years and you haven't, and there's nothing wrong with that. But people just like inherently resent the implication that someone is just, a know-it-all or like too smart or whatever. And that leads to them, just claiming that they're wrong or full of shit about everything that they say, I think. But I mean, Ben, you're the academic.
Well, you're the big smarty pants around here.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, you're so much better than us, Ben.
This is where they turn on me.
Someday Ben's going to get his.
I don't want to hear it from Mr. MBA and almost finished his master's degree, all right?
Hey, just because Trae was in the NBA doesn't mean he's better than us either.
Oh, maybe. But I mean, here I think, and this is like, so, Trae, I mean, tell me if you get this as well. I think one of the problems, particularly with the Southerners dealing with this, is, I mean, again, there's like, not all of this is like out of nowhere. Not all of it's unfounded. But like, Trae, have you ever talked to somebody and then they hear you have a Southern accent and talk to you like you're dumb?
Yeah. Oh my God. All the
You're
time.
in California.
All the time. Yeah, right. It's been happening because like the only thing we have up there in Clay County is a pretty nice lake, Dale Hollow Lake. And most of the people that come there in the summer come from up north. So like, it's a thing there. Everybody knows it. Like, it's been a thing my whole life as a kid. The tourists that come down the lake all think that we're the, dumbass local yokels and talk. And I waited tables in Cookeville and people would like speak slowly to me and things like that because of the accent. And so, I mean, that's definitely a real thing without a doubt.
So I think that, I mean, there's a sore spot with that. That's real. And the problem is that, when you have a bit of contempt like that, even if it's not everybody who does it has contempt, but like with a lot of people, they do. And like, I myself have seen this. Like, I remember being in Moscow, like on a Fulbright grant, like getting my PhD and having like some older, like not much older than me guy kind of like look at me and kind of make a joke about, bet you wish you were drinking Bud Light or something like that. And then I was like, you're right. I definitely do, because this Russian beer is terrible. But also, I feel like maybe you've got a problem that you need to talk about, because obviously my ideas got you at this table too, the same table you're at.
Mm-hmm.
But you found this thing, and it was almost like he was kind of trying to poke fun at me to like make everybody kind of laugh. And like the problem with that contempt when you see it is that I think there is that contempt from some people. And that's why like the thing that I keep trying to return to when I talk to folks about things is, if you don't show somebody that you love them first, like if you're not sharing ideas because you genuinely think they will make the people you're talking to better off or make us better off, if you come at it from a I know better than you, that's not going to win over things. And I think for folks who, especially folks in the South who have been poor and who have struggled, having somebody show up and talk to you like that probably gives a bit of a gut reaction that makes them less willing to listen.
So Chris Slaughter writes, honestly, given where the U.S. is right now, what chances do you give Trump winning re-election in November? Will he have to be forcibly removed from the Oval? Chris, your question presumes he loses. Your question presumes he loses.
No, actually, the question, will he need to be removed from the Oval Office, is one that could be answered whether or not he wins.
Yeah.
You know what? I think it's just say, let's say he loses, right? He will of course say it was, all the mail-in ballots and it was a rigged election.
Kids on bikes.
And this and that, and maybe he'll take it to the Supreme Court. Maybe they'll come up with some. There will be a challenge. The election will be the legitimacy of the election will be challenged. No matter what happens, win or lose, Trumpism may be here with us for a while after Trump, I think.
I mean, I definitely agree with you. I almost just don't even want to say, I'm not a superstitious person, but I like don't want to jinx it or whatever. But also, like, I didn't think he was going to win in 2016. I understood that it was like more serious, and I felt like a lot of liberals did, but I still, at the end of the day, didn't think that he would win, and was pretty blindsided by it. And I don't want to be in that situation again. But gun to my head, you're making me call it. I do think, dude, if the American left can't show up and win this election this fall, then like we need to just hang it up, man. Like surely we can. And I'm very worried about what happens. Obviously, I want more than anything for him to lose, but I'm very worried about what happens if and when he does. Not just with him, but yeah, like with his followers, his people. Because I agree with you, Trumpism isn't going away. But I mean, I don't care. I think it's got to happen. They'll get over it eventually, I think. But it'll be ugly, I think.
You can only control yourself, though. And like the thing to remember is, I know that like it's going to feel amazing if he for me, it will feel amazing if he loses. I guess that's the best I can say. If he loses, then I'll feel amazing. But like, don't be a jerk to people.
Yeah.
Right, like don't be like, well, you were there. It's like give them, like always give people room and like show them that like this really is something we want to be in on together. Because I'm worried that there's going to be so much resentment that people are going to be like in your face. It's just going to make it worse, man.
It's going to make it worse. Lisa writes that she doesn't want to jinx it, but she wouldn't be surprised if we don't even get the vote. If Trump makes it somehow that we don't even have an election. Which I think is unlikely, Lisa, because it's 50. Think of the election as 50 state elections, right? Yeah. The states control the election. So Oklahoma can say, hey, we're not going to vote, but, everybody else is going to vote. Tim Wells writes, do you think Clarence Thomas will retire if Trump loses and the Republican Senate forces through a Supreme Court nominee in the lame duck session? I would say anything's possible with the Republican Senate. I saw I didn't read the article. I saw the headline. Lindsey Graham going around supposedly telling older conservative judges to retire now, just in case.
Really, right now, when we're so close to a presidential election?
Oh, I mean, of course.
If a justice retired when we're so close to a presidential election, shouldn't we wait since there's an election coming up to see what the people actually feel like?
I get your smarmy innuendo, Ben, but before. Mitch McConnell's already said if there was a vacancy, he would fill it.
Of course.
And then he had that smile on his face. Guys, this has been great. Trae Crowder, thank you so much for being here. Yeah. I'm wrapping it up. Ben, is it okay I'm wrapping it up?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, check out Trae's podcast. Well read, and like his book, Liberal Redneck Manifesto. Yeah. His stuff is great, and I think that a lot of people if you, I mean, just listen to your podcast. I mean, I, as somebody who grew up in that world, it's so funny, man. I every time you talk about Tammy's on that podcast, I laugh.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Well, they're out there. I think I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's been great. And let's, do it again sometime down the road. Everybody stay safe and all that too. We'll get through it, I believe.
Trae, I wish you the best. It's been really great to do this with you and get to know you.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah.
Cheers.
All right.
Thanks for everybody who joined
have a good
us.
See you guys.
Yeah, we're going to do this again, everybody.
That's
Take
right.
care. Have a good night, Ben.
Night.